Monday at 7:30 on ATV. Now, from the #1 news team in Atlantic Canada, the ATV Evening News.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, a special edition of the ATV Evening News. Later in our program, an ATV News special assignment, Innocence Lost, the 7 shots that shook Sydney River.
For the first time, the complete story behind the brutal murders of 3 McDonald's employees and the attempted murder of a 4th in May 1992, with exclusive crime scene video and police interrogation of one of the convicted killers. So please stay with us later for Innocence Lost, the 7 shots that shook Sydney River. But first, our top story.
Topping the news tonight, teenage violence has again rocked another Halifax community. Several dozen youths went on a vandalism binge Saturday night in the city's Clayton Park area, smashing windows and overturning a car. It's the second such incident in as many nights in Halifax, and as John Waterman tells us, at least one high-ranking civic official says enough is enough. Something has to be done, and soon.
Friday night, 2 teenagers were injured in a street brawl involving more than a dozen youths in this public housing development. Bricks were hurled through windows, and so was a small bicycle. One
tell them that we don't want to fight, and we don't like starting fights, and if one of us gets beat up, I don't know, we all get in.
I just think we need more stuff to do, like to keep us out of kids getting out of trouble and stuff.
The biggest problem we have is the children just don't have a lot of things to amuse themselves in.
Halifax ATV News.
In a related story now, a precedent-setting case will be tried in a Nova Scotia court next week. A businessman is suing the parents of children who allegedly vandalized his property. Joe Camo of Conrad's Auto Salvage Limited has filed a lawsuit against 2 families of boys, both under the age of 12. Their identities are protected under Canada's Young Offenders Act. Charges were laid after 27 windows were smashed out of used vehicles in his Cow Bay salvage yard in October 1992. Car parts were also stolen. The suit claims the boys' parents failed to supervise the children, and that negligence made it possible for them to allegedly commit the vandalism.
Turning to other news now, the chief of the Big Cove Indian Band is admitting tonight that Friday's suicide on the reserve came as a shock to him. Chief Vincent Simon was talking to the man earlier in the day and says he sounded happy and content. He says the people of Big Cove are saddened by the death but are still committed to ending substance abuse and unemployment. The main reasons behind the suicide, the 9th in the last 18 months.
Everybody realizes that we're in a crisis now, and it didn't take us overnight to get into the crisis, and it's not going to take overnight to get out of it. So it's just a reality of it. But we're taking steps.
Police have not yet released the name of the victim, a man in his late 20s. Police found the man shot to death in his bedroom Friday night. An autopsy was performed yesterday. Funeral will be held Tuesday. An apartment caretaker has been called a hero today after saving the lives of a mother and her 5-year-old son. Perry Bennett rushed through this apartment building in Dartmouth after hearing a fire alarm at about 7:25 last night. He opened the door to the first-floor apartment when he saw smoke coming out from under it. Inside, he found 5-year-old Stephen Abraham lying on the floor overcome by smoke, and his mother, Kim, was getting up from the Chesterfield. Now, Bennett quickly got the 2 of them out and tackled the flames with a fire extinguisher until the fire department arrived. All 3 were taken to hospital and treated for mild smoke inhalation. The fire was caused by a pot of French fry fat on the stove.
The taps have been turned off at Moosehead Breweries in Dartmouth. The Maritime Brewery was scheduled to close its Dartmouth plant tomorrow, but production has been shut down early. 48 employees are now out of work. Moosehead President Derek Olin announced in June the company would be consolidating its beer production at its more modern plant in St. John. Moosehead will keep its Dartmouth warehouse and retail store open, though. A spokesman for the union representing the workers says it's been very hard on them because most have worked at the plant for many years. To New Brunswick now, where a pricing war is continuing between taxi drivers in St. John. Some drivers complain they can't make a living since cab companies dropped their fares last month. As ATV's Sally Cummings tells us now, frustrated drivers took their concerns to the Premier earlier this week.
everybody is right on edge. It's a real testy situation right now, the way it is right now anyway.
Taxi drivers in St. John are frustrated since the basic fare dropped from $3.50 to $2 almost 2 months ago. Drivers say they haven't seen the rates this low since 1985. But companies who started the pricing war say business has never been better.
And people are agreeing with the fares. It's a little harder on gas and stuff, but it's a lot better.
Well, I'm doing as good, if not better. I got no complaints.
But Ken Steves, who represents more than 350 cab drivers in the city, believes lower fares don't attract any new customers.
The feeling amongst most taxi drivers are pretty fed up. They're working for, I would say, less than $2 an hour, and this is day in and day out.
Drivers circled the radio station and honked their horns in protest earlier this week while Premier McKenna was speaking on a local talk show. They'd like legislation passed for a minimum fare. Taxis resolved similar pricing wars in Fredericton this fall by banding together. Drivers hope to have the rates back up here by the 1st of December.
And there's just no money to come into the business and spend 12 or 14 hours a day sitting in these cabs. It's a hard job. You put up with a lot of people, a lot of problems.
In St. John, Sally Cummings, ATV News.
High levels of fungus have been linked to a health problem at an elementary and district high school in Cape Breton. Parents with children attending the Isle of Madame school are meeting tonight to discuss a consultant's report which outlined the fungus problem. Public Works Canada says the fungus can cause severe problems for students with lung problems like asthma or bronchitis. Now, this is the 3rd school in the Strait of Canso area with an air quality problem.
Still ahead tonight, an ATV special assignment by Phonse Jessam. The inside details on the Sydney River McDonald's murders.
Yes, Phonse Jessam recounts what happened through the use of crime scene photos and video. Stay with us for Innocence Lost, the 7 shots that shook Sydney River.
This is all I have left of her. These guys are in prison. They're able to see the sunlight. They're able to watch TV. They're able to exercise. But all I have is a grave here with a headstone and a picture of Donna on it. That's it for me.
A benefit concert was held in St. John today for 12-month-old Andrew Bond. The baby was born with his heart on the wrong side and several other heart-related problems. Toes were tapping today to Winston Crawford and the Old Time Fiddlers. They're helping raise money to cover the family's transportation expenses and accommodations when Andrew goes to the IWK Hospital in Halifax for surgery this spring. Donations can be made to the Loch Lomond Mall Bank of Montreal.
Yeah, Maritimers really know how to chip in.
They certainly do.
This next story really shows it. A dream has come true for hundreds of people in the small Nova Scotia community of New Germany. Now, tomorrow morning, the doors of their very own medical center are going to open for the first time.
And it's not just your regular medical facility. This one was designed, built, and paid for by the residents themselves. Star Dobson now with the story of One Brick at a Time.
News.
Well, it's definitely as real. I don't think those residents know the meaning of the word can't.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. That's just, another great symbol of what the Maritimes are all about, helping out each other and showing that they can do it.
Absolutely.
Speaking about can do it, can Phil McLaughlin bring us a better weather forecast? Please, Phil, tell me, it's going to get sunny and up to 20?
Yes, it will, but not in the Maritime. Look down to the south, you'll find it. Hey, that's funny, huh? Okay. Some places it will get quite nice tomorrow, but not here. Here we're watching this shield of moisture, a low pressure area in the Tennessee area with lots of thunderstorms embedded in that cloud mass and rain as well, and a frontal zone through the St. Lawrence River Valley coming towards the Maritime. So there's a quick shot of the half-disc satellite imagery. So that's coming our way for Monday, wash day, not a good day to hang the clothes tomorrow. So here's today's weather map. The system we were watching last night is now in the Gulf of St. Lawrence and moving out to Newfoundland, taking the rain and leaving us the cloud behind. And hey, what a change today with the temperature, running about 5 degrees above normal. Yesterday, recall, we were 5 degrees below normal. Here's the next weather system, the one we have down centered near Memphis, Elvis country again. Rain, thunderstorms with that.
Championships are taking place. Dalhousie is in the finals. We haven't got a final score in. If you've got a score, please give us a call. Tell us. Ricky's got the rest of the sports. Ricky, what do you got up?
Jonathan, the CFL playoffs started today on 3 fronts. 2 other games are still underway. BC is in Calgary, while Saskatchewan Roughriders travel to Edmonton. Meanwhile,
I just want to make one quick note. We did get a call in. Somebody knew the Dow score. Unfortunately, they lost in overtime today at the CIU Women's Soccer Championships. Still, they came away with a silver medal. Great result for Dalhousie.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for your report tonight, Ricky.
Thanks, Ricky.
Still ahead for you, the latest on the national and international scene. The incredible story of Jody Buttafuoco draws to a close in a U.S. courtroom tomorrow.
And also, we're going to have amazing pictures for you from Arkansas, where several tornadoes have ripped through communities, injuring people, destroying homes. That story coming up next.
Good idea.
Could it get any worse? George Chuvalo, the former Canadian heavyweight boxing champ, has another son in hospital. That young man you just saw there, once again a victim of drug overdose. Stephen Chuvalo was rushed to hospital yesterday in critical condition. A police official says he was expected to live. Today, Humber Memorial spokeswoman Susanna Smith says he's in intensive care. The 32-year-old who wrestles with heroin addiction is married with one child. This is just the latest personal tragedy for his father, former boxing great George Chuvalo. In the past 2 weeks, his wife committed suicide. A son died of a drug overdose, and just 8 years ago, another son killed himself.
It's unbelievable. One of America's longest-running soap operas draws to a close tomorrow when Joey Buttafuoco is sentenced for statutory rape.
Buttafuoco pleaded guilty to one count of having sex with Amy Fisher before she reached the age of consent. Now, Fisher was earlier convicted and sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison for shooting Buttafuoco's wife, Mary Jo. Buttafuoco, by the way, faces a sentence of up to 6 months and a $5,000 fine.
Parts of western and central Arkansas are accounting for the damage left by several tornadoes yesterday. They injured as many as 12 people, destroyed homes, and knocked out power lines. The National Guard was called into one badly damaged town to keep traffic moving and to keep sightseers out. Most residents who fled the storms have now returned home. And meanwhile, in Pennsylvania tonight, 2 buses carrying band members collided yesterday, injuring 81 people. No one was seriously hurt, though. The 2 buses were on their way to a school marching band competition when one bus rear-ended the other. All of the injured were treated and released from 5 different hospitals.
Pope John Paul, as you can see, his right arm in a sling, blessed a crowd with his left hand today at the Vatican. The Pope's first official appearance since dislocating his shoulder. The 73-year-old Pope made his brief, regular Sunday noon address to a larger-than-normal crowd of several thousand people in St. Peter's Square. The crowd broke into applause and singing as he appeared at the window of his apartments overlooking the square. He fell last Thursday while walking down the steps of a podium after an audience. And in the capital of Somalia today, supporters of clan leader Mohammed Farah Aidid held a rally against the United Nations. The UN has blamed Aidid for the death of many peacekeepers. 15 Somalis were killed when their convoy was ambushed north of Mogadishu yesterday. The United Nations spokesman says the trucks were returning to Mogadishu after delivering supplies to Italian troops.
Fighting between Muslim and Croat forces in central Bosnia has led to chaos at 2 psychiatric hospitals. United Nations peacekeepers say hospital workers fled institutions and a nearby town after Croats entered the area yesterday. That left hundreds of patients to fend for themselves. Peacekeepers kept an overnight vigil at the hospitals. They say some patients wandered away from hospitals and picked up live grenades abandoned in the fighting. And copies of artwork stolen in Sweden turned up at a Stockholm museum today. A security guard found paintings and a sculpture this morning. Authorities later declared the pieces were forgeries of the stolen art. 7 paintings and a sculpture by Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque worth an estimated $60 million were stolen from the museum last week. A $36,000 reward has been offered for their return.
Sounds like somebody's got an awful lot of nice paintings in their home in Stockholm. Still ahead tonight, this special edition of the AT Evening News Weekend. A haunting look at a brutal Sydney River McDonald's murders.
When we return, the story behind the story, the horror and disbelief. An exclusive look at the 7 shots that shook Sydney River forever.
To do with it? I wasn't there. Nothing to do with it? You weren't there. Did you have knowledge of it? No. Come on, Darren. I mean, you've got 3 people killed. Does that matter to you? Like, you're a big yawn. So what? I'm tired.
that's the news for now. We'll be back just a little bit later. But now an ATV News special assignment for you. And we'd like to warn our younger and more sensitive viewers tonight, the story you're about to see is both graphic and moving.
It's the story behind the story that engulfed the Maritimes in horror and disbelief. The story of the brutal McDonald's murders.
Any victims' items? Clothing? We want that.
For 8 days in May, Cape Breton is an island of fear. The brutal execution-style murder of 3 McDonald's restaurant employees sparks the largest manhunt in island history.
When you start drilling, I'm not drilling it. I'm telling you right to your face that you knew something about it. And I told you right back, I don't.
I asked him, I said, you're awfully calm, and he goes, yeah, well, I finally got to slit somebody's throat.
Tried and convicted, 3 Cape Breton youth tarnished the image of the Maritimes forever. Now, from ATV News, Innocence Lost, the 7 shots that shook Sydney River.
Good evening, I'm Steve Murphy. At ATV News, we cover news for the home front. Stories about the Maritimes, about our lifestyles and our values, and about our people, the lawmakers and the lawbreakers. But of all of the stories we have ever covered, one stands out as the most gruesome and the most calculated. It was on the morning of May 7th, 1992, early that morning, that 7 shots rang out inside the McDonald's restaurant in Sydney River, Nova Scotia. The police figure only 6 or 10 minutes elapsed between the first shot and the last shot. But in that very brief period of time, a terrible crime was committed, a crime that forever changed Cape Breton Island. 3 of those McDonald's restaurant employees were killed. A 4th was permanently disabled. All 4 shot in the head. ATV's Fonz Jessom began covering this story within minutes of that last shot. And tonight he brings us the whole story of Innocence Lost, the 7 shots that shook Sydney River.
This is where the planning for the Sydney River McDonald's robbery began. It's a coffee shop in downtown Sydney. A very busy place during the day. It also becomes quite crowded late at night as teens and young adults gather here after an evening on the town.
18-year-old Darren Richard Muse, Derek Anthony Wood, also 18, and Freeman Daniel McNeil, 23. They were typical of the crowd at the coffee shop. Nothing about the 3 led anyone to suspect they were planning one of this country's most brutal and senseless crimes.
They weren't the type of kids. They didn't seem like bad kids. They were never really in trouble before. Darren was always quite an athlete into Taekwondo, and Derek was always quiet. When I heard the news, I was totally shocked.
This is the Sydney River McDonald's restaurant, the target of the robbery being planned by Wood, McNeil, and Muse. Wood had been working here about 2 months. Co-workers in management described him as a quiet boy who kept to himself. According to the store manager, he had no real friends among the staff. Workers say Wood was awkward. He was not awkward with his newfound friends in crime. He convinced McNeil and Muse that between $80,000 and $200,000 waited for them in the safe at the restaurant. McNeil wanted money because he was unemployed and was fixing up his girlfriend's mother's car. Muse said he needed money to get to Vancouver, where he had a job lined up with the Hells Angels. As they drove around, the plan evolved. Darren Muse would wear a mask and use his martial arts skills to subdue any workers encountered. Wood felt he knew enough of the combination to open the safe. After an aborted attempt, the trio decided upon the early morning of May 7th as the time for the robbery. Freeman McNeil took a tiny silver .22 caliber handgun from his girlfriend's home. He practiced shooting on a deserted beach. On the night of May 6th, McNeil drove Wood to work and gave Wood the gun. Wood's shift was an uneventful one, but when his work was completed, he did not leave. He stayed, smoking and talking to other workers. He helped Arlene McNeil conduct inventory. An hour later, he would shoot her in the face. While Wood helped Arlene, Darren Muse and Freeman McNeil sat at a nearby coffee shop, waiting for his call. Wood was to tell them when the restaurant was empty, and they could come to a basement door. Both McNeil and Muse donned an extra set of clothing. Derek Wood did not call. Instead, he walked to the shop, leaving his kit bag holding open the door. The 3 men headed to a deserted dirt road across from the restaurant. Later, they told police they believed all the workers had left for the night. But on the way to the basement door, they walked past the cars of Donna Warren, Neil Burrows, and Arlene McNeil. The three men entered the basement door where Wood loaded the gun. They began to head for the stairs. As they approached, they were surprised by Donna and Arlene. Recognizing Derek Wood, Arlene laughed, asking, "Is this a joke?" The three robbers stood, Muse wearing a Halloween mask, McNeil a plaid jacket and hunting cap. Derek Wood looked at his partners, raised the tiny gun, and pulled the trigger, shooting his co-worker. Arlene fell to the floor, grasping a handful of balloon sticks she was carrying. She had been preparing for a child's birthday party to be held at the restaurant the next day. Donna Warren dropped to the floor and cried beside her fallen friend.
It was at this point, while Arlene McNeil lay here bleeding and Donna Warren lay beside her crying, that prosecutors told the juries in the trials that followed the three men hatched their plan. A plan to kill everyone, to use silence as their ally. Derek Wood began to act on that plan immediately as he ran through this door and upstairs to where cleaner Neil Burrows was working.
Upstairs, Wood pulled the trigger again. Burrows was shot in the head, but death would not come quickly for the young husband and father. With Burrows down, Wood returned for Donna Warren, shouting, "Come on, bitch," as he led her to the upstairs safe. As shift manager, she had the combination. She fumbled and cried, "I'm moving as fast as I can," as she turned the dial. As the door opened, Wood shot her in the back of the head. She fell back against the wall, and he shot her again, this time in the eye. Wood then began clearing out the safe. In his haste, he left hundreds of dollars lying about in cash drawers readied for the morning shift. McNeil and Muse were over near the sinks where Neil Burrows had fallen. McNeil told police Muse stood by Burrows with blood all over his gloved hands, saying he won't die. Derek shot him, and I cut his throat, but he won't die. Burrows begged McNeil for help, but McNeil struck him with a shovel handle, knocking him back to the floor. In McNeil's version of what happened next, Darren Muse stood over Burrows and fired a shot into his head. Muse told police he was by the safe, that McNeil had the gun when he heard a shot from the area by Burrows. The three then headed for the rear door, where they met James Fagan. The maintenance man was more than an hour early for work, as was his habit. He greeted McNeil, Muse, and Wood, saying, "Hi, guys." He was then shot in the head by Freeman McNeil. The robbers ran back to the car. They threw the money in the back, in all $2,017.72. Also littering the floor were hollow point .22 caliber bullets. Wood realized his kit bag, which contained his McDonald's name tag, was still holding the basement door ajar. Incredibly, the trio headed back to the restaurant to grab the bag and make sure Arlene McNeil was dead. When they arrived here, they saw the taxi that had taken James Fagan to work. The driver had heard the shot that killed Fagan and radioed for police. The killers drove to a nearby bridge where Wood got out and ran to call police and tell them he was smoking outside when he heard shots and ran. As Wood ran, the first police officers arrived. What was inside, even veteran officers found so senseless and grisly, they cried. Upon arriving on a crime scene, police quickly secure it to protect evidence. In the early stages, that did not happen here. Police believed the gunmen were still inside. They slowly searched the restaurant, guns drawn, as ambulance attendants and taxi drivers attended to the fallen victims. The scene was so confusing, a curious motorist was able to stop and almost enter the restaurant.
I was kind of curious as to what was going on down there, and I walked down over the hill there, and I walked right up almost 5 feet from the door, maybe even a little closer, and when I looked inside, I could see a lot of blood around.
The call quickly went out. Reinforcements arrived, and forensic experts began to comb the crime scene both inside and out. While police looked for evidence, Darren Muse and Freeman McNeil were destroying it. After counting out the money at McNeil's home, they went to a nearby brook and threw away a cash box, some McDonald's coupons, Muse's shoes, and 2 knives he carried during the robbery. They had already discarded the shells from the gun and the clothing they had worn over their street clothes. Derek Wood wandered around until police picked him up to take his statement. In this video recorded that morning, Wood is inside the police car parked at the bottom of the restaurant driveway, about to take an officer along the route he claimed to have run after hearing the shots. The officer did not believe him. Wood was taken to the Sydney RCMP detachment for questioning as officers held the first briefing for reporters.
As a result of an apparent armed robbery, 2 persons were shot and killed, and 2 other persons were shot and are in critical condition in Sydney City Hospital. All 4 victims are employees of the Sydney River McDonald's restaurant.
In the first few hours of May 7th, officers concentrated on the story given by Derek Wood, finding problems with it early on. Wood claimed he had run away from the basement door, yet footprints led from the door into the restaurant, not away from it. Wood got a break as police were sent on what they later called a wild goose chase. A woman came forward saying she knew who committed the crime. Officers concentrated on this false lead, and Derek Wood was allowed to go home. As Mounties searched for their new suspects, people in Cape Breton began to react to the shootings.
We've gone from a so-called tranquil community, a community with easy living type of atmosphere, to one of violent crime almost on a daily basis. And that's quite a transition.
I think the thing that's really disturbing about this is the violence. We know that people come in, and if they're looking for a few bucks, we give it to them and they go, and that's the end of the incident. But this seems to be the violence where they're killing people. It is getting really scary.
On May 8th, as police picked up the men they believed were responsible, hundreds gathered in the street to watch. Later, investigators checked the alibis provided by the suspects and realized the mistake they'd made.
The suspects that were in custody have been released, and the status of the investigation is that it's continuing, even more upbeat than it was before. There are a number of things we're looking into.
Within hours of releasing the suspects arrested that Friday, RCMP began focusing on Derek Wood. Wiretaps and a surveillance team were used. Wood led officers to Freeman McNeil and Darren Muse. McNeil had driven Wood to work on the night of the robbery, and Muse was McNeil's alibi for the time of the shootings. During the week before their arrest, the three partied with friends, played pool, and McNeil purchased a number of car stereo components. In checking McNeil's alibi, police found Darren Muse evasive. They asked Muse to take a polygraph, something being done with people police hope to eliminate as suspects. We have obtained the RCMP videotape of that lie detector interview.
Close your eyes and remain perfectly still during the time I'm asking the questions. Okay? Okay. It's important that you remain perfectly still.
Scratch everything.
Last week, were you involved in any way with the theft or the robbery at McDonald's?
No.
When the 18-year-old failed, police pushed for an explanation.
Say to you, and from those charts today, there's no doubt in my mind you're connected with this situation, the murders at McDonald's. You know something about it. And if you can sit here and deny that, there's a something going terrible wrong up there in your head.
No, I have a conscience, and I'm telling you that...
Well, there's something wrong with that conscience, Darren, because people just don't do this. Normal people don't do this. And you came in here today and you didn't pass that polygraph test. What's that going to tell me? It's got to tell me that that heart inside your body is reacting to those particular questions in relation to that murder.
When you start drilling...
I'm not drilling it. I'm telling you right to your face that you knew something about it.
And I told you right back, I don't.
You did. Now come on, Darren. Be honest with me, boy.
I am.
You're not.
I told you.
Who are you afraid of?
No one.
There's got to be somebody, Darren. Holy jeez, boy. There's so many inconsistencies. I'm working on his stuff. When he was shot here in the back of the head, when his neck was cut, when he was shot there, when he was shot through the ear because he wouldn't stay down. Were you there then? Or the poor bastard when you were going out the door and he was coming in because he was late for his shift. Were you there when he got drilled right there? Tell me. Tell me.
I wasn't.
You weren't there. Drilling you.
I told you that I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't there.
Nothing to do with it. You weren't there. Did you have knowledge of it?
No.
Come on, Darren. I mean, you've got 3 people killed. Does that matter to you? Like, you're a big yawn. So what?
I'm tired. I want to say one thing. You told me when I came here, right?
Yeah.
If I want to leave, I can leave, and you said you'll leave right there and then.
That's right.
I asked
we can go.
5
we can go.
times. Okay.
We can go, but you just remember that there's 3 people dead. We don't believe you. Okay? We don't believe you one little bit. You're not pulling the wool over our eyes. Someday, some policeman's going to come to your door. Right?
Retain and instruct counsel without delay.
The following day, Freeman McNeil was picked up and pressed on inconsistencies in his statements. McNeil changed his story. He took police on a reenactment to support his new claim that he only picked up Darren Muse following the robbery. This is the RCMP video of that reenactment.
I asked him, I said, you're awfully calm, and he goes, yeah, well, I finally got to slit somebody's throat.
Did he actually say that in those words?
He said that in those words. I never asked Darren or Derek about the gun, or the knives or anything specific like that. Darren told me Derek was the one that did all the shooting, but I think it was probably Darren, because I saw Derek a few days later, and Derek was, he looked very shaken up. And about this point, he walked down.
McNeil showed police where Muse had disposed of evidence, a brook where they had recovered a cash box and knife 2 days earlier. Later, police told McNeil they had information linking him to the crime, and he refused to cooperate further. Officers pressed, but he remained silent and was arrested. Using information provided by McNeil, police set out to arrest Darren Muse and Derek Wood, and a third man McNeil named, who police discovered was not involved. That man and Wood were at a Sydney club celebrating Wood's 19th birthday.
We just walked out, and the cops were all around, and our two friends got arrested, and we got taken down for questioning.
We were in there having a few drinks, and we walked out. When we walked out, when the fellows we were with was already in the police car, and we came out, and the police were all around us, and they threw one up against, put him up against the wall, put the cuffs on him, and told him he was under arrest for murder.
The first of the three suspects to break under the police pressure was Derek Wood, when after hours of sitting in this chair and insisting on his right to remain silent, he leaned forward and picked up a list of the charges against him and said, guilty, guilty, I'm not sure about that one, guilty, not guilty, and guilty. He was asked by police why. He said he was scared, and then gave them their first detailed account of what took place inside the restaurant. While Wood confessed, McNeil slept in his cell. Police woke him and showed him Derek Wood's statement. After being pressed for hours, he confessed. Darren Muse talked after being shown the statements of his two accomplices, statements that incriminated him in the murder of Neil Burrows.
All three have appeared before a justice of the peace and have been remanded in custody.
Public outrage surfaced as hundreds turned out for the first court appearance. 3 trials were held. First, a jury heard conflicting views of Derek Wood's involvement. His defense claimed he confessed to protect a friend, that he never took part in the shootings. The Crown disagreed. After 12 hours of deliberations, the jury sided with the Crown.
Relief. Oh, God, that he can't hurt anybody else.
Relief for the families was short-lived. The Darren Muse trial started the next day. That trial did not proceed far before a change in plea to reduce charges was accepted by the Crown. 3 months later, Freeman McNeil stood trial in Halifax. The venue change had been requested by his lawyers because of intense publicity surrounding the first 2 hearings. The jury found him guilty of the first-degree murder of Neil Burrows, but only of second-degree murder in the shooting of James Fagan. The victims' families were upset with what they felt was a lack of justice.
I'm telling you, this justice system stinks. Here they come now. Come on, boys, right now.
All 3 men were sentenced to life in prison. For Muse, parole could come after 20 years. For Wood and McNeil, after 25. For the families, the ordeal is far from over. With the trials behind them, the relatives of the 4 victims have begun trying to put their lives back in order. For Neil Burrows' family, there are constant reminders of the loving father who lived for his baby boy, of the brother who loved joking with his sisters and brothers.
But every day we sit home and we wait. I sit at my kitchen table and I wait every day for my brother to come and have a cup of tea with me. And my family wait for him to visit.
My son came to see his father and I in the mornings on his way home from back shift. And we still expect him to come to see us. And his father is very upset. His father's heart is broke. And his father just wants to get out and take justice in his own hands. Because the legal system works for the guilty, not for the victims.
James Fagan grew up in a happy home filled with brothers and sisters. Jimmy was the easygoing one in the crowd, and his family still find his violent death difficult to accept.
Our own boys will say, the other boys will say, why Jim? He was so easygoing. Why, it could have been, should have been me. I can get holler or get mad at times, but why should it be Jim? It's just...
Yeah, just the way it turned out, I guess. Not much you can do.
Yeah, but it's really...
But Jim, I don't know, he had a knack with people. Like I wrote a victim's impact statement, and I said that Jim never saw ugly people or pretty people. He just saw people, and he liked them.
Anything that you want now are planning on doing. It hasn't got that same impact that it had before. Christmas coming, vacations, we have a summer cottage. We haven't been out there. I think we spent 2, maybe 3 days out there since it's happened with Jim. I don't know, I just can't understand how we're going to get our lives back together again. It's going to take a long time, I think Alan and I will be gone, and our children will still be trying to wonder why this happened.
Well, we pretty well know why it happened. I mean, everywhere you read, it still says a botched robbery, but I don't believe that theory at all. They went in there, they wanted the experience of killing somebody. Muse wanted to cut somebody's throat. The others wanted to watch somebody die with a bullet in his head. That's why it was done.
Every day, Olive Warren visits the graveyard near her home. She comes to remember Donna, the little girl who loved school and hoped to someday be a criminal lawyer. Olive tries to understand what happened.
To me, it was not a robbery that went bad. To me, it was an execution. If they had went there to rob the place, they would have got the money. There was no problem with that. She would have gave it to them. She'd always told us. If for any reason anybody came in to rob her while she was there, she'd give them the money. Right now, this is all I have left of her. These guys are in prison. They're able to see the sunlight. They're able to watch TV. They're able to exercise. But all I have is a grave here with a headstone and the picture of Donna on it. That's it for me. I talk to her. It's comforting just being here, being close to her. And it's her when I turn around to walk away. It's like her voice is saying, yeah, you're leaving me. Why don't you stay?
Arlene McNeil is the only surviving victim. The young girl who loved to party with friends and shop and plan for the future has a very different daily routine now.
What do you do here in a day? What do you play on the computer?
Concentration.
Is that part of the therapy?
Mm-hmm.
Are you good at it?
Yes.
Arlene's dreams and her hopes are gone, you know. She was determined that she was going to go through university, get her degree. And she had a steady boyfriend, and they were talking about after she finishes her education, she was going to get married and have children. She was always told me she wanted 2 children, a boy and a girl. And that's all taken away.
That's my pride and joy and my star. You know, she's here, and that's what we want.
Members of the victims' families have started a campaign aimed at changing the Canadian criminal justice system. They want to see a return to capital punishment, or at least the introduction of consecutive sentences in cases of multiple murder. However, they say even if they win that fight, it will do very little to reduce the pain from the permanent scars left from the 7 shots fired in Sydney River.
The most frequently asked question about these brutal murders is, how could 3 seemingly normal young men take part in this kind of violence? Well, a forensic psychiatrist offers the group dynamic as a possible explanation. That is that people will do in a group with peer support and peer pressure things they would never do as individuals. But that is only a theory. The question of why they did it will never be answered. From ATV News, heartfelt thanks to the families of the 4 victims for allowing us to help them tell their tragic story. And thank you for watching.
Really tragic story. Stay tuned because we're going to have more on this story coming up after the break.
We'll be back after this short break with a wrap-up on today's top stories along with Phil's first of the week forecast. There was a touching reception in the Cape Breton community of Brewery this afternoon.
Arlene McNeil, the lone survivor of the Sydney River McDonald's restaurant murder robbery, met residents to say thanks for the support and the encouragement. Our Greg Boone attended and brings us the story.
Arlene McNeil entered the Brewery Pensioners Hall with a wave and a thumbs-up sign. In response, she was greeted with applause and a standing ovation from well-wishers.
Hi, sweetie. How are ya? Love you.
Arlene McNeil was shot in the head during the May 1992 robbery at the McDonald's restaurant in Sydney River. 3 other employees died. After the violence, the community responded with generosity. The Friends of Arlene McNeil Foundation raised $113,000 to assist the McNeil family and Arlene with her recovery.
Everybody wanted to be able to do something to respond to this horrific crime, and I think we gave them that opportunity by allowing them to come work with us and do some volunteer work and support the family.
It's just been a great feeling. It's just very few words can describe it, but it's a good feeling.
The family is overwhelmed and wanted in a small, quiet way to say thank you.
We're so happy to have her back, and she seems to be coming along so well that we're just so happy.
We prayed that she would come back. Yeah, hope to God that she'll keep progressing.
Beyond the social aspect of the McNeil family thank you was a special presentation to help Arlene with her everyday life.
The Friends of Arlene McNeil Foundation purchased a specially equipped van to give Arlene more independence. Her rehabilitation and other medical treatment will continue, but the wheelchair and custom van are making it easier for the family to get around. The McNeils say the support is appreciated and thank what they call a caring community. In Brewery, Nova Scotia, Greg Boone, ATV News.
Let's now take a moment to recap our top stories from around the region today.
Halifax's deputy mayor is demanding something be done after the second incident of youths going on a rampage in Halifax this weekend. In the latest vandalism spree, about 50 youths went on a window-breaking spree and flipped over a car in the city's West End. So far, no charges have been laid. And in a related story for you tonight, a lawsuit blaming parents for vandalism allegedly done by their children begins Friday in Halifax. It's the first case of its kind in the province. Joe Camo of Conrad's Auto Salvage filed the suit after windows were broken out of used vehicles and parts were stolen from his salvage yard in Calbay, Nova Scotia.
The Moosehead Brewery in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia has closed its doors for the last time, a little earlier than expected. The brewery was to close tomorrow. Instead, it closed quietly last Wednesday, putting 48 people out of work. The union spokesman says it's been hard on the workers, many of whom have worked at the Dartmouth plant their whole lives. Coming up later tonight on the ATV Late News, tag along with New Brunswick Premier Frank McKenna as he and other MLAs tour our region. Premier McKenna says he has his ear to the ground and wants to hear from the public on what concerns them. And as you'll see, he does. Now to Phil McLaughlin with a very quick peek ahead as to our back-to-work weather forecast. Phil, what do you got coming?
Well, the wake-up weather for the day Monday, tomorrow, certainly not user-friendly. We have that rain system coming up from the southwest and from the west, double-barrel system coming at us, so a wet day through the day tomorrow. Wet snow across northern New Brunswick.
Thanks a lot, Phil. A quick look now at ATV's primetime lineup for you tonight. At 7 o'clock, it's Rescue 911. 8 o'clock, it's America's Funniest Videos. 8:30, the new America's Funniest People.
And at 9 o'clock, Lois and Clark with the new Superman. And then at 10 o'clock, the CTV Sunday night movie, Return to Lonesome Dove. That's our report for tonight. From everyone here at ATV News, thanks for joining us tonight. Have a good Sunday night.
Good night, everyone.